Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me once again is Senator Mark Warner, Vice Chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Senator, thank you so much for joining me.
Brittany, thank you so much for having me.
Senator, I really appreciate the conversation today because it's a continuation of something you and I spoke about a month ago. Since September, the United States military has struck over 20 vessels in the Pacific and Caribbean, and more than 80 people have died in these attacks. The Trump administration, though, has said that these strikes are a campaign against drug trafficking. There's renewed scrutiny on the first of these strikes that happened on September 2nd. After the initial strike, there were apparently 2 survivors clinging to the side of the boat. There was then another strike, and the survivors were killed in that strike, and 2 more strikes followed. You were in the group of lawmakers who saw the video of this entire attack play out. So to start off the conversation, what did you see in the video, and what did you make of it?
Well, Brittany, to say the video was disturbing is an understatement. I think and the notion that these were somehow still combatants. The boat blew up. There'd been 11 people on the boat. 2 were survivors. There was a piece of the boat still floating in the water. And the administration is trying to make the case that they were still actively in combat, in a sense, against America. And, again, I'm not reaching a conclusion because I want the video to be seen. Although it's going to be hard for the administration to make this case. I want the legal opinion that justified this action to be laid out and seen by the public. And there are a whole host of questions, that still need to be answered. I mean, let's go back and look at just the underlying rationale. The administration decided in late July, didn't really tell anybody at that point, that they were going to suddenly designate these drug cartels as active terrorists the same way we designated ISIS, Al-Qaeda, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. And that, in a sense, possession of drugs, they almost tried to make the legal argument, was somehow the equivalent of having weapons or bombs. That policy decision, they started planning in August. They never provided a legal document. In fact, the legal document was not finished until 3 days after this September 2nd strike, and the Congress never saw the document until late November. I think America needs to see it. And, so there is a whole underlying justification here. And then there is the debate about, even if that was justified to strike this boat and then to do the second strike, really raises questions about international rules of legal warfare. I mean, America has aspired or ascribed for a long time that, you can't blow up survivors if they're in the water from a ship. Now they are arguing slightly differently. And I want to, not so much, I mean, I've called for Pete Hegseth to resign. I've not been a fan of his since the Signalgate days, but I am, I want to get all of the facts, because if an accusation is made that this is a war crime, that's something you can't pull back. That is something that, based upon international law, the damage that would do to American military's reputation with Americans and the rest of the world is really, really serious. So I want to see the order. I want to see the communications between the admiral, who, at least based was ordering the second strike. I want to know what Hegseth's initial order was. So we've got more information to come, but this is something that cannot be swept aside. This is something that the Congress and the public needs to see the video. They need to see the legal opinion. And frankly, the admiral and Hegseth and others need to come back and testify before a full committee. I was fortunate, actually. I was the last member to see, and I had more time with the admiral and as well as the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And, there may have been some serious judgment miscalls here, but I feel like, what we're seeing here is our military being potentially put in legal harm's way because of a not thought through policy. And this isn't the first time, because the same thing that happened this week in terms of with Hegseth, with the Signalgate Inspector General coming back and saying Hegseth's irresponsible actions in, I believe, February, literally put our troops in harm's way. So this has been a really challenging week on the national security front.
I know that the rest of the American people have not seen this video, but you said that the two survivors were not combatants. Were they able at all to flip that boat over? I know Senator Tom Cotton said it looked like they were flipping the boat over. Were they trying to flip that boat over at all? And B, was there any way for them to contact anyone? Did they have any radio access or anything like that?
Brittany, I don't have the full answers to those questions. I have an impression that obviously, and the only reason I'm hedging here is because I think the ramifications are so serious that if they didn't and they didn't have communications, it's hard to make the case that they were still combatants. And if they're not combatants, and I'm not an expert on international rules of war, but these are rules that American military adheres to. I mean, we're in very serious circumstance. So, and that's why, again, I've done a couple of interviews today, and I know people, well, what did you see and what are you thinking? And I think I've indicated what I'm thinking is this is very, very, very disturbing, and that's why I want people to see, and they will make their own judgments beyond the legal arguments. But I think we're treading on very, very, problematic grounds.
I appreciate you hedging. I appreciate just how serious you take the accusation of a war crime. I have members of the military in my family, veterans rather, and so I do appreciate that. But when you had conversations, you were in a briefing with Admiral Frank Bradley. He is the person who ordered the subsequent strikes. Did you learn anything from that, A? And B, did he think that that was a misjudgment in firing those subsequent strikes?
Well, clearly, I think Admiral Bradley understands the rules of engagement and rules of war. I think he made very clear that if he felt they violated those rules, he wouldn't have acted. And that's why I think we need to put this in the context of what was the execution order, which is what were the communications between the Admiral, his team, and the pilot. There were reports of a second boat, but there was no evidence of a second. This is where I'm reluctant to go too much into the details, because I'd like there to be a comprehensive set of facts out there. Because if I think any public official that speculates that this may have crossed the line, once you cross that line, it's hard to take that back, because these are as serious a charges as you can possibly imagine. And it's not only, and just to be clear, we're not only talking just about, Hegseth's policy here, or the Trump administration's policy, or even the actions of this one admiral who has a very good reputation. But if lines have been crossed and the ultimate kind of charges are brought, that is a reflection, as you said, and I've got veterans. My dad fought for the Marines at Iwo Jima in World War II. I don't want to use any of this terminology loosely. So let's get the facts, let's get the information. But I do think that regardless of the legal, arguments and judgments, the video is chilling.
And I think that when you heard from lawmakers coming out who saw the video, it seemed like there was different. They viewed it maybe from a partisan lens. You're hearing Democrats say one thing, you're hearing Republicans say another. And the chairman of the Senate Intel Committee, Tom Cotton, he said that these were righteous and lawful strikes. He added that these were all narco-terrorists. Based on what you saw, do you agree with his characterization at all? Do you think that these were lawful and righteous strikes, A? And B, is there evidence that every single person on that boat, survivors that were subsequently blown up included, were they all narco-terrorists?
Tom Cotton's initial premise that these were lawful, I got a question about. I got a question about the lawfulness of the legal opinion. I got a question about why the legal opinion was not even written down until 3 days after this strike and whether there was any changes after the strike to try to add additional protections. I think the policy was not well thought through, which is different than lawful, but it's a huge concern to me. And without the facts of the execution order itself, and the communications between the admiral and the folks in the airplane shooting munitions, I'm not going to reach a conclusion. But if I had Cotton's conclusion, I would voice it to you. I obviously don't.
And so I'm going to ask about the narco-terrorists. Is there evidence that all of these people were narco-terrorists?
I think we have good evidence that these boats had drugs on them. But then it still begs the question, if you had drugs on the boat, we've had drugs on the boat for years, is the idea that we're going to blow them all up as opposed to interdict them, or somehow make the comparison that these are the equivalent of Al-Qaeda or the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, that's a big stretch there. I think there was knowledge of who was on this boat. I have not seen, the proof that every one of these were narco-terrorists. That may have been, and people may have asserted that, but until you see the evidence, or until you have, you could have, and again, this is where I don't want to get too much into speculation, but you could have had the person that leading the communications be a narco-terrorist, and you may have the names of the other folks on the boat, but does that by definition mean that everybody else on the boat is a narco-terrorist? And that's why I'm being hesitant here. And and we have seen, and here's the problem where this gets so, again, not gray but complicated, is we've seen other circumstances where people, when the boat was similar to collapse, but they were actually fully in the water rather than holding on to the remnants of the boat, where they were not killed but picked up. So that's, is that a definition that legally holds water of a difference? I'd like to get better legal opinion than me, but it all goes back again to the legal argument, the policy argument, but then what your eyes see, and whether that is appropriate action for the American military or not. And and again, this is why I've called for Hegseth's removal. I voted against him. I called for his removal when the Signalgate fiasco exploded. I called for it again after the Inspector General's report. I called for it when generals were being fired for political purposes. And now the idea that these policies that may not be legal are potentially putting our military in their own legal jeopardy is really, really a challenge, and not something that our country, I think, has grappled with. I recall some of the awful circumstances in Vietnam, where there was an individual named Lieutenant Calley and accused and convicted of killing a number of civilians. I'm not making that comparison yet, but I do know that once you get into this accusation or definition around war crimes, boy, it will change how Americans view our military, and it will change how the world views our military. And again, our military has done, I know, inappropriate things, but we have laws, rules, and I think a level of professionalism in our military that is extraordinarily high. I have huge respect for the men and women who protect us, and that's why I'm being so cautious with you and others. I hope not to be as cautious once we get all the documentation and information.
Definitely, as we see new developments come out of this, as we see more documents, as well as if the public is able to watch the video of the entire September 2nd attack, I hope you can come back on and break it down. But Secretary Hegseth, he denied that he ever made an order to kill all the survivors, but he did say Admiral Bradley, he made the right call and he had the complete authority to do so. And Admiral Bradley backed up Hegseth here. He said, according to your colleagues, that he didn't receive any type of kill them all order. But you said in an interview before you had that briefing with Admiral Bradley that you wanted the truth. And based on what you saw in that video, based on what you heard from Admiral Bradley in that briefing, do you feel that you've gotten that full truth surrounding the strike yet?
I want to see I'm repeating myself, the communications between the admiral and the folks in the plane. I want to see the execution order. I want to know why the legal opinion didn't appear. And frankly, we in Congress didn't see it till November. So it wasn't even written down until 3 days afterwards. Did anything happen in those 3 days? I think the admiral, and I also met with the the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Kane. I think they were trying to be honest. But this question of, if the goal was to kill all these people, whether the Secretary of Defense said, kill them all, somebody had to have an issue. Somewhere along the way, there had to be some order given that the goal should be no survivors. So whether you verbally said those words or not, if that was the goal of the mission, that should be in the execution order. And that again goes back to then the presumption that everybody on the boat is a narco-terrorist, whether we had proof or not. And all of this pushes us into a gray area on a policy that I don't think most Americans, or for that matter, the rest of the world, understands. And equating ISIS, Al-Qaeda, or the Iranian Revolutionary Guards to drug cartels. Drug cartels are bad folks. Whether we should, have a policy that says they're bad folks, and we've been trying to interdict them and arrest them, and now we're just going to willy-nilly kill all of them. That is a dramatically different policy than has ever been the policy of the United States of America. And again, I think we get ourselves in really, really dangerous grounds.
And my last question to you, I want to read a quote from Secretary Hegseth. He said this: "I did not personally see survivors because that thing was on fire and was exploded, and fire, smoke, you can't see anything." And he added this is called the fog of war. And I understand that is a phrase, but is the United States in war right now?
That is a very fair question. And as the former chair and now vice chair of the intelligence community, the fact that I can't answer it should trouble all of us. The fact that, Secretary Hegseth, who, brings all of the military leadership to Quantico and lectures them on military behavior, and then on the signal gate wouldn't even cooperate with the Inspector General. That's not taking responsibility. When he now brags about this strike in the immediate aftermath, and now looks like he's dodging. And when the administration, when the strike first took place, I could have understood. I wouldn't have agreed, but I could have understood. Well, they said, well, all of this video is classified. But no, they didn't say that. They immediately put out the video of the first strike. How can you say, I'm going to promote that and brag about it, and then say, oh, by the way, which we didn't even know, that there was a couple hours more of that video? I mean, this is not the way the American military should operate if it wants to retain the trust of our people and the trust of the world. And again, I don't blame the American military on this. I blame this administration and this Defense Department secretary.
Senator Warner, I appreciate your time once again. And as we see more and get more answers from this situation, I hope you can come back on and join me. Thank you for the time. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you so much.